What is the strangest, creepiest thing that has happened to you that left you saying what the heck was that? Went camping with school. Stayed in a fairly nice campsite in the woods. The very first night about 6 of us shared a big tent and we're all laughing and joking as kids do. Then one of the lads suddenly says what the frick is that with a genuine look of horror on his face. So we rush to his side of the tent and peer out into the darkness towards the big communal campfire, and I crap you not, all 6 of us saw what I can only describe as a pair of white legs, no upper half, walking around the campfire before vanishing. We were in shock for a while before we all collectively just laughed hysterically whilst crying inside. Still to this day I have no idea what we saw. It genuinely looked like a pair of white trousers just walking around. Sounds like the stories of the Fresno Nightcrawler. Got up at like 2 AM to go pee because I was still up. While washing my hands I saw something move very fast past the bathroom door. Only saw through the creak. I was once in a Bookies and a bloke randomly jumped on my back and tried to squeeze my balls. I shrugged him off, turned around and saw him laughing so loudly as he walked out the door. That was 8 years ago and I'm still like, what the frick just happened? Maybe he bet to cover the spread. I threw my towel on the floor to take a shower. The door was locked. When I stepped out of the shower, it was folded on the toilet seat. The most disturbing part of this story is that you just throw your towel on the floor. On Christmas I had a dream that an ex-boyfriend I hadn't spoken to in several years was holding my hand. When I woke up, I was laying on my back with my hand above the covers. I always sleep on my side under the blankets and I could still feel his hand holding mine. It was like a cartoon, where the character falls as soon as they look down. I felt his hand holding mine as plain as day, as real as the bed beneath me, but the moment I looked, I couldn't feel it anymore. It creeped me out for a few days and I couldn't get over it, so I tried to get a hold of him. His social media was inactive, so I shot his mother a message. He had taken his life a week before, and I was in his note. I hadn't heard from him in years and hadn't been thinking of him for any particular reason. Had I not had that dream, I wouldn't have made it to his memorial or seen what he'd written me. Bittersweet, creepy, interesting. At the time, I never really thought much of it because of my age. When I was around 8 to 9 years old, we used to live in a semi-detached house where the stairs were by the left side of the house and the neighbor's home was to the right. Important for later. Another important fact was that an old guy used to live there and unfortunately passed away. I made friends with the neighbor's kids because we realized we went to the same school. One day I was walking up the stairs whilst knocking my knuckles against the wall playfully like any child would. I heard something knock back and at the time I was young, so I assumed it was the neighbor's kid knocking from the other side. I knocked again and heard the wall knock back. It wasn't until I recalled a memory and floor plan that the neighbor's house wasn't aligned with the stairs. The other side of the wall I knocked on was plain land. Dude, we had that in the house I grew up in as a kid. It started out with the sound of a bouncing ball going down the hallway, and then one morning my parents heard a knocking sound inside the wall and so they knocked on the wall and it kept knocking back. I was chilling at a library one day and the lights went out. I felt a hand on my shoulder and breath in my neck. When the lights came back on, I no hand was there, no breath. Almost pee myself in public. I believe you. I love libraries, but they can be freaky at night towards closing when most of the patrons leave, or in that stack where no one really goes and you are alone. It is no coincidence some horror movies have scenes that take place in a library. This happened back in the mid-80s. My sister's ex-boyfriend and I, we were friends. They were still on friendly terms as they shared a child, were driving home from San Bernardino. We were traveling west on Interstate 10. It was around 8:30 PM or so. We both noticed a really bright light, looked sort of like flames, to our direct right. There were fields to our right. We felt a little rumble, then we saw, both of us, although I was also driving so had to be careful, a missile or something literally fly up into the sky from the ground. We weren't drunk or high, we were just surprised. We saw other people looking over to the right as well from their cars. 2 cars actually pulled off the freeway to the side. I was scared shitless. I told him to put it on one of the news stations. I told him try KFWB. He did and he was near tears. We seriously thought we were going to war or something. Finally, we put it on another station. We were still on the freeway, and we stopped on Kid Ice and they were actually talking about it but didn't have any specific details on it. Maybe a minute's worth of talking about it. We finally got home and busted in the house telling everyone what we saw, and I turned the TV to one of the main stations, hoping for a special report to break in. He went and turned on my stereo to the news station. Nothing. No reports other than the small snippet from Kid Ice FM. We searched newspapers, watched news, listened to news for the next week. Nothing. We both absolutely saw this, as did other people on the freeway, but nothing was ever spoken about it after that. I still love Kid Ice FM. Used to listen to Rick Dees every morning. The time I visited a nursing home with my friend so she could go see her mom. We were on our way out when some old lady in a wheelchair gestured towards me and started calling me my mom's name. My mom's mom died in that nursing home and it was likely one of her friends. And I look a lot like my mom, at least when she was my age, so I can see how she'd confuse us. I couldn't stop to talk to her because the nurse saw and told us we shouldn't. I tend to suffer from bad dreams, and occasionally a lucid one. I always sleep with the door open, so a bit of moonlight comes in, just enough to see a silhouette. One day I am in between being awake and being asleep and there is a black silhouette of a person standing in the door opening. I start screaming like crazy, and at the same time this person starts screaming too and runs towards me in the dark and sits on top of me. I scream even louder, almost to the brink of crying out of panic. This continues for a good few seconds until I recognize the voice. Calm down, it's me. Turns out it's just my girlfriend, who'd gone to the toilet, tries to go back to bed as silent as possible and is met with insane screaming. There was a debate for some time who scared who more. My dad, my brother, and I were at a house with several outbuildings that my uncle had bought to fix up and sell. My uncle was showing us around. It was a very weird place. It had wainscoting over a door in the basement and a long tunnel running to the outside with metal teeth over the end. You could see sunlight through the tunnel. It was just big enough for a small man to crawl through. On the main floor, at the back, was a room with a lock on the outside. The room's walls were covered in black plastic. No windows. The floor was painted blue with milk paint. I felt an immediate sense of foreboding and refused to stay in the room. My brother and I went and looked at the Quonset house that was one of the outbuildings. It must have been set up for a family member. Upon opening the door, we found the main room almost knee-deep in kids' toys. We walked towards the front where the kitchen was. There was no door, just a curtain. I immediately had an intrusive thought that told me that there was a family in there at a formica table with silver edges. The mother was cooking and there was a man and two kids there. I completely felt that is what I would see. I could see that the table and kitchen were yellow. All of this in my head. I pulled back the curtain and, of course, no one was there, but I had the kitchen correctly in my head. The entire layout was exactly what I thought it would be. My brother and I turned and left without speaking about it. About 10 years later, I brought it up to my brother about what I thought I'd see after opening the curtain. He said to me, "That's exactly what I thought I'd see too. Something bad happened at that house. I don't know what it was, but something bad happened." Your post made me cry. I've had that same feeling before a few times. The knowing that something bad happened when you look at a certain location. It's a horrible feeling, especially because there's nothing you can do about it. Used to work for this dementia home and one of the patients, who was particularly unstable, started screaming at me with a face of genuine fear. She then said, "You're the boy, you're the boy, you're the boy," before she got wheeled away. I knew she was sick but it really shook me up. Maybe I was the boy. You are indeed the boy. Feeling the sensation of an ice cold hand tighten around my neck followed by not being able to breathe for a minute or so. I have no medical conditions or allergies. It's never happened before or since. Just some freak panic attack or something, I guess. When I was in high school, my family and I lived in a loft above an insurance business downtown, and it was a smallish building. Small enough that there was only room for one apartment, so we were the only people living there. At the time I would get up the earliest, so everything was pretty quiet aside from the usual car noises from outside. One Monday I woke up to my alarm and I thought I heard a jingling sound. I turned my alarm off and sat up in my bed listening for a few seconds before I heard it again. I couldn't think of an explanation. I didn't have anything with bells on it that I could think of. I looked under my bed and around my room to see if anything had fallen that would make a sound like that, but there was nothing. The setup of this apartment was weird. I had to walk through my little brother's room to get to my room, and so I walked through his room on my way out to the living room and kitchen. My brother was still sound asleep and I didn't see any toys around that would jingle like that. Upon entering the living room, I immediately noticed that the laundry room door was open. Not wide open, but cracked open enough to make it obvious. We always kept that door closed unless we were in there doing laundry. I looked around and didn't see anything out of place. When I got back from school I asked my parents and brother if they had left the laundry room door open and they claimed not to. On Tuesday everything was normal, but Wednesday the same exact scenario happened again. I woke up and heard unexplained jingling, and found the laundry room door cracked open again. Fast forward about a year later, my mom had moved the stove for the first time since we lived there and we found cat toys underneath. Cat toys with bells in them that jingled just like what I had heard before. When we initially moved in, my mom had found what appeared to be cat litter on the floor in the laundry room, and she had even heard a cat meowing at one point and looked everywhere only to find nothing, and assumed that it must have come from outside. After piecing all of this together though, we couldn't help but wonder if we had a ghost cat from a previous tenant living with us, batting at the jingle toys, and going into the laundry room to use the litter box. The door was open just enough for a cat to fit through. It never happened again after those 2 days though. Weird. I was on a volunteer fire department and we were called out to a single vehicle rollover. There were 2 occupants in the vehicle, a guy and a girl, boyfriend and girlfriend, and the girl was very much dead when we got there. We waited with the guy on the tailgate of the vehicle until the ambulance arrived and stabilized him for transport to hospital. While we were waiting he explained that they were sitting side by side, cuddling as they drove and sharing Mike and Ike's between each other's lips while kissing. The next day the fire department had a debriefing meeting to check in on one another after such a stressful event. This one guy starts explaining a recurring dream he had where the girl who died in the crash was trying to get his attention to explain what had happened, how they had a candy between their lips kissing. He didn't even know what Mike and Ike's were but kind of explained that they were like candy Tic Tacs that were longer and started with the letter M. When one of us suggested Mike and Ike's he exclaimed, "That's it. That's what she was trying to tell me." This freaked the heck out of me. The guy was on tragic duty for this call and was easily more than 500 yards from the scene of the accident. There were only 3 firefighters at the actual scene, I being one of them. Because the accident was late in the evening, we didn't debrief immediately after because everyone needed their sleep. There was no way Buddy could have known this intimate detail of the crash. It was all unexplainable and easily the eeriest things I have ever experienced. Thank you for the work you do. I worry about you folks and adore you. A guy fishing with a fully dressed outfitted dummy. It was in Luray, VA along the Shenandoah River, a pretty isolated area. We were walking our dogs and passed 2 guys at river's edge, fishing. Not that unusual, until I realized that one of the guys was in reality a dummy mannequin fully dressed in a fishing outfit. Its arms were out, rigid, holding a fishing pole. I totally freaked out internally but kept telling myself I must be imagining it. I didn't say anything to my husband because I didn't want to draw the attention of what might be an absolute lunatic. As soon as we got past them my husband, the most level-headed guy in the world, looked at me and asked if I'd seen the guy fishing with a dummy. Cue internal screaming. He probably read Fishing for Dummies. 1. While I was living in my in-laws, I would sometimes smell cologne that an older man would wear and this was always around 2-3 AM when I would get ready for work. I knew it wasn't my fill because he was still sleeping at that time and he doesn't wear cologne that smelled like that. 2. When I was a senior in high school, my family went out of town for the weekend but I decided to stay for whatever reason. The next morning, after coming out of the shower, I noticed I had close to 40 missed calls from my parents and siblings. I called back to see if everything is alright and they were freaking out because supposedly the first time they called some man named Rob answered the phone and said that I was busy and couldn't talk and he started laughing. They hung up and called again and the same person answered the phone saying the same thing and calling me by name. A few minutes later the cops showed up to our house and checked inside to make sure no one was in house. They think I had a party and was playing a joke on them, but I wasn't into partying at that time. We still don't know who that person was or how he answered the phone. I randomly looked out my bedroom window and seen two guys at my elderly neighbor's back door working on the lock in the middle of the night. I phoned the police and must have fell asleep. I went round the next morning and chapped the neighbor's door and got no answer. I left it at that, and couple of weeks later I was in my pal's house and the neighbor's grandson thanked me for looking out for them. Turns out it was two on-call council workers repairing a damaged lock. I still don't know how he knew it was me. Our elderly neighbors down the street were murdered in a home invasion. I wish someone had seen it and said something before it was too late. When my sister and I were 9 and 5, we heard tapping in our second floor bedroom window. We were too scared to check it out at first, but then we saw hands. Human hands. She opened the window and pushed the boy who lived next door out of the tree. That'll teach him. I was at work, heading into my bar. To get to the bar, I had to take a freight elevator down. There was a man with a trench coat just staring at the wall. I didn't think much of it, so I just entered the elevator and closed the door. Mid-elevator ride, the man lets out a creepy laugh and jumped and faces me and says, "You have sealed your fate." I'm thinking to myself, WTF is this? Am I on camera or am I gonna get stabbed? So I proceeded to grab my knife out my pocket, but the man said, "Hey, have you ever played Resident Evil 4? I let out a nervous laugh and said yes. He apparently was quoting a line from that game. Weirdest thing ever. Good thing I didn't pull out my knife. This was just this morning and supremely creepy, so why not? My husband and I woke up around 6 AM to the sound of a sick cat yowling. If you've had a cat, you know exactly what kind of awful sound that is. It was windy and storming all night, so this was loud enough to be heard over the tail end of the Frozen mix. One of our cats is sound asleep at the foot of our bed. After confirming, yes, we both heard that noise, he asks whether I want to check on our kid or the other cat. I opt for the other cat. The kitten is sleeping in my chair and not pleased about being checked. Our kid is also sound asleep, not making awful sounds. I can't explain it. We both heard it. We lost one of our cats to heart defect with a rapid deterioration. That low, pained yowl is a sound we definitely both know. It's living creature sound and it sounded like it was just outside our door. We both woke up in a cold sweat. It's possible that we both had a nightmare and woke up at the same time. The one thing I do know is that it was absolutely not how I wanted to wake up today at all. We've definitely been pondering what the heck that was on and off all day. Sounds like a spooky story, and happy cake day. Still creeps me out to this day. I wasn't a sick kid or anything, but I remember one time when I was oldest, 6 years old, and sleep on the couch with a bucket sick, and I had a very detailed dream. Probably inspired by the Pajamaster movie, but I was in a really old library with my father. He was looking for a new sci-fi book and I felt drawn to a section with old-fashioned leather-bound books. I pulled one from the shelf and flipped through it. I went to put it back, but the void where I had drawn it from was pure black and a small white light could be seen. I stared and watched as the white light came closer and formed a tiny human shape. As it walked forward, I remember specifically the sounds. A needle being dropped on a tile floor followed by a phone book being dropped on a wooden floor. The needle echoed but the book did not. As the form got closer, the noise got louder too. When it reached the edge of the shelf, it was the same height as the books. I remember being terrified of it, so I ran. There were adults around me but they heard and saw nothing. I screamed for my dad but couldn't find him. When I looked back at what I was running from, it was now hunched over and had its legs nearly curled up to its chest as it tried to fit inside the library and reach out to me. I couldn't hear my screaming or anything but the repeated needle and phone book. Pretty sure as it reached out to me I woke up, vomited, and the world kept spinning even though I was awake. Couldn't heard anything but those dang sounds. I used my pillow to try and drown it out till I fell back asleep. This memory is super clear and the sounds are insanely specific. Probably just a fever dream. Once when I was similarly sick and had a really high fever, I had some really wacky dreams. Nothing as creepy as that, but definitely some weird stuff, including the radio communicating with me mentally, and the knobs having unique sounds as they turned of their own accord. Fever brain is weird. I was walking my dog one day in the park. The park is pretty big, with a lake and a part where the path leads through the woods. Me being a dumbass, I forgot it was getting dark early, but I decided to continue walking. My dog is pretty big and protective, so I felt safe enough. She was walking loose ahead of me. Her collar has red lights in them when we turned the corner through the woods. It was getting darker and darker, and even though I know the park like my back pocket, I turned on the flashlight on my phone. Anyway, a few minutes go by. Just silence, sounds of my footsteps and the wind in the trees, when my dog suddenly started growling. I stopped. She's standing a few feet away, just a ring of red lights staring at the trees. I call her and she's by my side in a second. I don't know why, but I dismissed it as dumb doggy behavior like smelling a rabbit or whatever and keep walking. Very stupid, I know. So we keep walking, dog by my side, my flashlight in front of me. We turn another corner and my dog growling again. This time I freak out a little and look around me with the flashlight. Nothing. It was just a minute of walking before the path led us back into the park. I could make a run for it, but I had this weird feeling. So I took a few steps forward and saw someone standing a little away on the path. Just standing there, like they just appeared out of nothing. It was weird and I immediately felt nauseous. My dog starts full on barking, growling. Back her standing up. She's a very social dog, even with complete strangers, so this had to be bad. Her barking kind of shocked me into moving. The moment I grabbed her to turn around to make a run for it, the figure stepped forward. I never ran so hard. I ran all the way back to the little bridge that connected the neighborhood to the park. My dog was still with me, thank God. The moment I got home I called the local police and asked them to check it out. They didn't take it that seriously, because nothing bad happened, but they sent a car over. They found nobody, of course. I slept badly that night and it took me a while to walk there again, even in daylight. When I was at my wife's parents' house, she was in her restroom, in her room, and I was on the bed and whistled and heard someone whistle back from outside of the room. Nobody in the house admitted to the whistling and it sounded like it came from upstairs since her room is next to the stairs. I was later told it was her dad's mom and she used to do that with him and his brothers when they were little in order to find them. This was told to me after I was having a conversation with my father-in-law and felt someone blow on my ear, and at the same time he looked past me to the side of my head where I felt the air blow and said he saw her do it. Not me, but a close relative had a rather strange coworker. At one point she was looking at my relative. Then when relative asked what, she said, "You should be glad I didn't run you over with my car this morning." They didn't see each other at all that morning, didn't come from same place and went in 5 hours apart. What? I was 6 or 7. For some reason still sleeping in my parents' bed. Recently my friend's older brother told me about Slender Man BC. This was the time where he started blowing up. And I couldn't sleep because I was excited for the next day because it was our yearly family vacation. And I looked over at the end of the bed and I swore someone was standing there. I tried to ignore it, but then I also saw someone leaning over my father on the other side of the bed and began bawling. Still have no clue what I saw or WTF was happening in general that night. I used to be so scared of Slenderman. I don't know why, because he wasn't real. While I was asleep something under my bed was making noises and I could feel something kinda pushing up on the slats. I was freaked out. My cat was in another room. I didn't see anything under my bed and just slept on the couch. I think the person that lived under me was installing hooks on their ceiling and the hammering transferred. I'm still not sure. I'm frequently at a church during the week for meetings and such. In the past few years I've been coming there. I've had to go into the sanctuary during the week for something twice. I can count that all the lights and things will be out and I'll be the only one in the building. Anyway, the 2 times I've been in there during the week I've had a distinct feeling of being watched. I have these full body shivers, where my vision fades in and out and I have trouble keeping my balance, and I hear whispers. It's very weird and I think it's just my brain trying to make sense of a bunch of shadows and general creepiness of the place. The dead are attracted to churches for the same reasons as the living. Maybe it's just your imagination, but next time it probably wouldn't hurt to say it's okay for you to move on now. God loves you and is waiting for you on the other side. Some people fear judgment after death, I think, are afraid to cross over. That's what a lot of mediums claim. Anywho. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.